So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Unfortunately, you cannot see me. This is a IT issue in my company. I traveled this morning in from my house to the center of Zurich just that I have better IT connection, but it seems like the firewall is blocking my camera, so my camera is not connecting to go to, and obviously then you cannot see me. But I think the most important is, first of all, that you see my colleagues who give the presentation together with me. It's Martin Kaut from Partner E and Jindrich Wagner from Perils.
Hello.
Hello. I don't know if anybody else sees your camera. I can't see you. Maybe when you switch on your camera, I have no visibility of this, but nevertheless, when you take over your task, then I think you should be visible for the attendees. So thank you very much that you joined this workshop or webinar. It's a little bit a mixture of both, where we would like to explain you the background, the actuarial basics of the three new indices we launched 2020, and we are already preparing the campaign for 2021, and we had the impression that it's important that people understand the theory behind these indices and also the way we are collecting and processing data. And that's why we will give you a little bit of background today. We are not focusing that much on the results we have presented earlier. You have here on the screen the links to the YouTube presentation and to the Emea website where you have the presentation available. Important is for us that you get a feeling, and hopefully also in 2021 participating. Thank you, Stephanie. She just said me that Martin and Jindrich are visible for you guys. Thank you. So I will guide you through this presentation. A big part will be introduced or told to you by Martin. He will go into the actuarial details, and Jindrich will tell you how Perils is collecting the data. I will also introduce a new topic which we will tackle during the campaign 2021. Let me quickly switch to the laser pointer mode. This is cause of loss. We had the feedback after the presentation at the IMIA conference that we tackled the mega losses. These are market losses, but there are only a few in the last 30 years, so around about 100 above our threshold of 50 million. So these are the headline losses, even going into the press. But what happens with the attritionals and the large losses, which are maybe not that visible? What are the cause of loss behind these? Because you might remember, for example, NatCat for the mega losses were not the big drivers. And we thought it's a good idea, and our colleagues from the London Engineering Group did already some work there, and we joined forces for this task. And for next campaign, we have a group dedicated especially to the causes of loss. This will, on a statistical basis, try to assess where do the losses come from, what are the driver of losses, and this will then make a bridge between the mega losses, which are somehow very special, very complex, very big risks, and the big bulk of our business where we have clear drivers of losses, be it, for example, water or be it DSC or whatever, so that we get a feeling what is actually driving our losses. Most important, whatever we do, I repeat myself again, it's all in accordance with antitrust and data protection regulations. This is the backbone of whatever we do. We take this very seriously. No collusion, no discussion about things which are not allowed by law. You have it here again highlighted in yellow. This is really the backbone of this entire initiative. To complete with this, to fulfill this, we needed, as I already explained, a third party which is independent, collecting the data. And for 2021, it's also planned that Perils will send out the questionnaires, the surveys, and they will collect them as well for several reasons. First of all, we think everything regarding communication should be in their hands, so that for IMIA, nothing is visible who participates, who receives it, etc. So we won't have any possibility to track on this respect. The other important reason why we wanted to shift everything to parallels, we had issues with macros in the Excel spreadsheets. Later on, I will show you in a demo how you have to fill in the spreadsheets, and there you will see in the old versions we have still macros. We would like to overcome this because the macros were blocked by many of your companies, the IT security systems and firewalls, and with this independent partner we can send out spreadsheets which are by far easier and will not be removed from your IT security. One major motivation why we introduced these new indices was the problem that in the past we had the financial year logic in the country stats, and first of all we only showed 3 years in a row, and secondly the biggest problem of financial year logic is that you do pay losses with premium which stem from other years. So you might have underwritten a risk, a project in 2010, and then the loss happens in 2014, and you pay it with the premium from 2014. So you detach premium and losses. They are not linked to the same year, not to the same underwriting year. And this obviously introduces volatility and disguises or hide trends and patterns. We have tackled this already before, and we also showed in the presentation during the IMIA conference, when we were looking into more years, we took 12 years of the country association stats. Then we could see that actually the trend we were observing with the IMIA rate change index translated directly into loss ratio increase. So the rate change index showed over many years a clear trend downwards, and the same trend we could see upwards. If you only show a few years, 1, 2, 3 years, you could even believe after 2010 loss ratios went down, and all this volatility is mainly due to financial year logic. And one other problem we often had, we are dividing incurred premium, incurred losses may be somewhere in the middle of the year against written premium, which represents the premium which is written over an entire year. We do not know exactly how it was reported, but this could be one explanation why in general the loss ratios were very low, while we knew anecdotally that the loss ratios, many members told us, are higher. So it could well be that, for example, we were constantly using incurred losses against written premium, and they were not taken at the same point in time in a year, these two figures. So many ambiguities, topics, points which could or which introduced a lot of volatility and problematic statements which were produced out of this financial year logics. And we have now with us Martin, who is giving normally a course in the IMIA Academy about reserving, and this is actually his topic, and he will introduce you the fundamentals of reserving in engineering lines of business. And please, Martin, I would like to hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, all of you, for having me. Welcome to this webcast held by IMIA. My name is Martin Kaut. I work in Partner Risk Specialty Lines Division, mainly focusing on property, energy, and engineering treaty business. The reason why we're looking at this is, as Simon explained, the full year display of loss ratios for individual years may not be 100% correct, as we're probably comparing apples with pears. I mean, when we talk about engineering business here, given the development, especially of project business from the CAR, EAR side, we should take care of the long tail perspective or long tail development of this business. For example, if a certain business is written to an underwriting year, which may start 1/1/2008, this project may last 6, 8, 10 years and will see losses during the time of construction and will show peak exposure to the end of the project. And that's why it's probably better to not compare apple with pears, but apple with apples, in a way like on a financial year basis, we are holding new losses against old premium, speaking very simplistically. And this will lead us to the problem that we are, or that we potentially may miss trends in the industry, increase in exposure, random walk of large losses, rate increases and decreases, not reflecting the exposure of the project appropriately. If we go to the next slide, as Simon quickly introduced, could you please go to the next? Thank you. On the next slide, you see to the left, I mean, IMIA has been aware of this issue since quite a while. So basically, with a working group paper written by some of our dear colleagues in 2011, I think we have tried to tackle this issue already. And it's really, I mean, financial year, of course, is given from legacy systems, but here I think it's the challenge and the need to come to the other perspective. As Simon mentioned, we are also lecturing on this topic in the Emea Academy. That module is called Claims and Reserving, and I need to send a disclaimer. Apologize. This we're doing a little bit of detour here to the reserving side, which might not be everybody's cup of tea. There might be some people on the call who know this topic inside out and who work with it daily. So I beg your pardon and ask your patience. And we also have some people on the call for which this might be mind-boggling. At least it might be new or complex. So please take the time to look into this carefully, and I promise it will not hurt. So when we look about reserving, what does it mean? As I mentioned earlier, we want to follow the path of a project, its development. If we come to the right-hand side, and at the end of the day, we want to derive incurred loss ratio, which means claims over premium per underwriting year. When we look at the right-hand side, we basically have this project incepting somewhere in 2001, 2002. At the very beginning, there's little exposure. There's no big burn load. There's no big inception hazard. It might be, I mean, this would be a pretty high-rise building, but if you allow me this example, in the very beginning, you're only digging a hole. And only in the course of the construction, there would arrive more equipment, more material, and the building would be built to its final state. So on the right-hand side, we're showing the CAR EAR portfolio. That means what is seen in this writing in its entirety, and which is a rather accumulated view of all the risks. So you wouldn't have erratic kind of nature from individual losses, but if you have a so-called normal year, whatever is normal these days, you would basically see a slight increase of paid losses over the course of the go. You would also see with claims notifications, not each loss would be paid in day number one. You might incur outstanding losses that you're reserving for, which is the red area. And here and there, you might think you want to reserve a loss even higher than you get it reported, which would be the green part, ACR, or you're even building up some buffer for your portfolio, which would be the purple part, which we're calling IBNR here. At the end of the day, if one of these underwriting years is fully developed, you only should see a blue part because every loss would be paid. With that, if we please can move over to the next slide. Similar thing is true for the premium. When we had been discussing claims before, here we're looking also accumulated premium of a CAR portfolio. So, and we shouldn't spend much time on that. Is really to hint out there's written premium. That's premium you put on a slip. You have a project insured for $1 million. That's your written premium. You would allow for installments over the duration of the project, which is basically the blue premium. And once these installments are paid, you would book them. This is pretty much given by fact and arranged by contract. We come to the next part, the green part. It's the earned premium. That's a little bit artificial No contract will tell us what's the right earning pattern, but rest assured we will come to that in a few minutes. If we please switch over to the next slide. So when we said we need reserving, we need reserve adequacy, it's an actuarial task and it doesn't hurt. So we should bring light to the actuarial side. I mean, actuarial science is relatively developed. It's a mature field of science. Maybe not everybody would agree, but that's the broad perception. And for us, it's very important. It's rather applied than being developed further. So when we look at who's stakeholders in reserving, why are we doing reserving, and why do we want to achieve reserve adequacy? I mean, clearly, where there's regulators, agencies, there's rating agencies, there's investors in companies, there's tax authorities, and there's also our own management who are interested in high reserve adequacy. You're not seeing the policyholder here. I mean, clearly he's an integral part or he's an integral stakeholder. We hope rating agencies are taken care of by certifying companies and giving them good ratings, as well as regulators, to secure policyholders' interest. If we come to the next slide, please, we will also see the immediate impact that reserves are having clearly on the income statement, with setting reserves, with incurring reserves, or even with strengthening reserves. We are reducing our profit. And that's at the end of the day what we tried to express earlier. Reserve adequacy from day number one, so later actual results matching initial reserves, gives high confidence in insurance companies are doing the right thing, know what they're doing. So whilst it's having an impact on the income statement, you would also have it reflected in the balance sheet, which we see on the left, where it would be displayed as a liability. If you can please switch to the next slide. So for sake of completeness, here we're showing the claims tree. Once you're having a claims notification and you've had your loss adjuster on site, there might be payments to the loss, but we also might realize there's an unpaid part, which would at the end of the day relate to our loss reserves, which can be split to case reserves, which are rather set for individual losses. When we see on the top outstanding loss reserves, that's just the unpaid part of the total loss. We would be able to set additional case reserves, as we heard earlier. And more importantly, from a portfolio perspective and given the long tail nature, we would be looking at bulk reserves, which are broadly called incurred but not reported, a term which is a little bit misleading, because if we come to the next slide, here we would clearly see it's not only for losses which are incurred but not reported enough, it's also for future liabilities we expect to incur on a portfolio. And this is, of course, on the one hand side, a science, on the other hand side, an art, because if we come to the next slide, please, we will see clearly from a triangle, and this is the view we want to take. To the left hand side, we will have on a vertical axis underwriting years 2008 to 2019. So underwriting year 2008, for example, is a reinsurance treaty or is just the financial year of a ceding company, which starts 1/1/2008 and which ends 31st of December 2008. Any risk written to this underwriting year, of course, will go through a certain development, and that's what we see on the horizontal axis. This is basically the development years of the individual, we can say financial years, which we would accumulate up. So we would see the loss ratios are increasing from year 1 to year 6 and stand roughly at a 60% loss ratio. But then we would also realize, if we look on a full development, like we're only having 12 years, we would be looking at a 75% loss ratio. If we go back a few years to development year number 8, now knowing the future a few years, knowing the past a few years later, we would realize development year 8 gives us sort of an idea which loss ratio we're talking about for this portfolio in a certain underwriting year. We also see this for subsequent underwriting years, 2009, 10, and so on. From development year 8, we know this is a point in time where we get some certainty about the loss ratio, the ultimate loss ratio of our portfolio. But this always needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, because there might be underlying trends, either like exposure changes, rate increases, decreases, which might shift this a little bit back and forth. More importantly, depending on what underlying business we're writing to a certain portfolio, i.e. What's the duration of the projects we're writing to these underwriting years. But moreover, once we get some kind of observation and get some kind of certainty, where we're more or less talking about a matured portfolio, we're looking at the gray part, the gray half of the triangle to the bottom right, where we clearly don't have numbers, and we're interested to figure them out. So a way to do that, if we come to the next slide, please, is a methodology called H2H factors or loss development factors. There's different names for the same kind of thing. And very simplistically, and please, we have all this information in the IMIA working group paper, and you have received the link to this source prior. If you have any questions on this, please read into the paper, or please send us an email so we can take care of it. But very simplistically speaking, on the top left, we would realize for underwriting year 2012, on development year 1, we would be looking at 100 units of loss, development year 2, 140. So from year 1 to 2, we saw an increase of 40%, which we are then reflecting in the bottom left, like Simon's showing you. Once we've done that for a few underwriting years, we are able to accumulate the factors, the development factors, from year 1 to 2, from year 2 to 3, and from year 3 to 4. And if we come to the next slide, please, we will be able to fill these numbers that we've derived from prior underwriting years, which have already one more development year, where we're able to backfill and to complete our triangles, and thereby assessing our need to set final IBNR. Like in year 2013, we will see there's no more development. The loss development factor is 0. For underwriting year 2014, we realize there's a jump from development year 2 to year 3, which gives us a 9. But from year 3 to year 4, there's no further development, so we stay with a 9. And for underwriting year 2015, we're upgrading from year 1 to 2 by 45 units. We're upgrading further to year 3, and we learned from the years before there's no need to further uplift from year 3 to 4. But in total, we would see our IBNR needs to be set for an additional 52 above what we see in development year 1. So this was basically the oversight. If we're coming to the next slide where we are ready, we'll see different development methods. I mean, this is really down to the actuarial science, and I don't want to bother you with that. I mean, here it's important more to know what you can do, and it's relying on accurate data. So we have a certain kind of need to upgrade our systems, or to think about how we can capture the data appropriately in order to be able to build up that triangle, because only then our math will apply. So if we come to the next slide, please. This was already the main course of the presentation, but we come to the dessert. As we promised you earlier, we looked at the loss side of the actuarial and of a portfolio and how to develop it to an ultimate perspective. But of course, we had this green area on the premium side that we also want to elaborate and spend some time a bit. So within an engineering portfolio, you have the machinery breakdown, electronics, or some kind of property to say short tail lines of business with a rather static exposure. And the right-hand side, you will see the project business, CAR, EAR, with a long tail proposition and with a build-up of exposure. So if we come to the next slide, we want to capture we want to capture the project business not in a linear way, like we're doing to the bottom left, where we're earning our 105 premium units proportionally over all the 3 years, say 35, 35, 35 in years 1, 2, and 3. But we want to get an idea of what's appropriate earning pattern. So the answer to that we're getting on the right-hand side, where we basically break up this 105 premium units according to the exposure of the projects that it has over the individual years. So in year 1, we only would earn 15 of the 105 because we think really there's a hole in the bottom, and there's a few trucks and a few small diggers on the side. And whereas in year number 2, material might be delivered, we might have the foundations. And in year number 3, we will be close to completion of that, say, high-rise building. The facade's fully stuffed, the interior is fully equipped, and we will already be putting the chairs in. So with that, we come almost to the conclusion. I mean, this was really a short overview of what you will find in the IMIA paper. The important part is, like you saw, or like we mentioned in the triangle already, there's many influencing factors like rate strength, like major losses, or general loss trends, where we try to bring some light to in the subsequent part of this presentation. And it will basically show there's a need for collaboration between the functions that we see in insurance, in reinsurance companies, whoever the interested party is, just the underwriter, the actuaries, claims personnel, financial, then maybe even the management, to work together on this topic to address it appropriately, not to underestimate a downward trend, but also not to underestimate an upward trend and not to miss the train. So I think we will have some time for Q&A later on. You can always refer to the paper. And with that, thank you very much for having me, and handing back to you, Simon. Simon, I think we can't hear you.
So Simon has moved forward with one slide. I'm back again. My name is Jindrik Wagner, as you can see on the bottom of the slide. And I'm working for Paris, especially on this project, cooperation with IMIA regarding the service. And before I joined that, and before I retired, I was reinsurance pricing actuary for the P&C treaties in Zurich with SCOR. Now, Simon has already explained why Perils was invited by IMIA to enter the IMIA survey process. It was on the slide number 3. As an independent party, Perils as an independent party preserving the data protection and anonymity of the data among the IMIA community, and complying this way with the antitrust laws and GDPR. Now, my speech will be not so long, I hope. You can move to next slide, Simon, please. Okay, waiting for that, yes. So this new, actually, role of Perils within the entire survey process shows also the need to clearly define who is doing what. So there is a split of roles and responsibilities between IMIA and Perils. So I will expand on that a little bit more in detail. And finally, I will show you what we do at Perils with your data. When we get your data responses, how do we actually calculate on the example of ILORI, loss ratios index, how we calculate the final aggregated trend. Okay, Simon, next slide, please. Now, IMIA role and responsibility stays in the designing part at the beginning, the same as it used to be always. It is about the defining the concept, content, and format of the survey. You see how carefully the scientist on the upper left corner, upper right corner, looks into the future, what we might get out of this battle. So the major goal, or major role of IMIA as the owner of the service is to define the content. Also, an important role is to establish a list of addressees who will be addressed for the survey. So certainly it will be a good part of the IMIA community, but perhaps also others interested parties. Together with Perils then, we define the entire process of how to collect in a timely manner the responses, data responses from the addressees, how this data should be aggregated, and in what format Perils should then deliver the anonymized results back to IMIA. So at the end of this part, IMIA prepares a complete package with questionnaires, with accompanying text, how to fill in and in what format the data, deadlines, and the list of addressees, and hand this complete package of survey to Perils. Now we go to the next slide where we see Perils' role and responsibilities. So Perils now sends out the survey package to the addressees and immediately starts monitoring the ongoing data responses from the addressees. And looks also at both quantitative and qualitative aspects of the backflow. Some companies may have some problems with the required format, so we might step in there and give some advice. At the same time, Perils starts aggregating these incoming data responses on an ongoing basis, informing in certain intervals, time intervals in IMIA or IMIA Executive Committee, always in an anonymous way about the progress, how the responses come in. At the end, when the deadline has been reached, so Perils establishes the results, final results, anonymized. So it's basically one large triangle in the case of the ILORI survey, loss ratio triangle, but also it summarizes the insights into the entire survey process in order to suggest and give some feedback to IMIA for possible further modifications and improvement. So it is about managing the process of getting back information, data from the addressees, from the participants in the survey. On the next slide then, IMIA steps back again into the workflow and interprets the aggregated results provided by Perils, present them as you have seen already during the IMIA virtual conference mid-September, can derive some conclusions and raise discussions on different topics with IMIA members. At the same time, also not only about the survey results as such, but also evaluating the quantitative and qualitative response or backflow from the addressees together with Perils in order to seek feedback to ensure in the next year edition possible improvements, modifications of the service. So this final stage is actually dedicated basically to quality. What can we derive as conclusions from the results, and what can we improve in view of the next year edition of the survey? Now, the next slide shows actually these 3 slides before in a very short wrapped up form here along the time axis throughout the year. So when we start for the year 2021, next year in January, there will be still some fine-tuning of the questionnaires, preparing the survey packages, fine-tuning the list of addressees, and coordinate with Perils to achieve a very efficient process. Then this package, survey package, will be given to Perils, and Perils will send out by about mid-April. It's not yet fixed, absolutely, but we anticipate about mid-April sending out the entire survey package to the addressees or participants in the survey. And immediately we will expect from some companies data responses, perhaps also some questions about format, about difficulties with spreadsheets, etc., etc. So we will be monitoring at Perils the data responses and start an ongoing aggregation of the data, giving now and then some feedback to IMIA on the progress of the backflow or of data responses. This will go till about start of July. This is the deadline we would like to receive the last responses from the participants in the survey in order to be able then to fine-tune the aggregate results and summarize all the process insights of the backflow. So it is also keeping in mind it's holidays time, so many companies will have limited capacity to provide statistics, and also on our side we won't be all the time available for this work. Definitely the next deadline would be the well-established IMIA conference by mid-September, where IMIA then will present the results, the aggregated results, and derive possible conclusions. In the time after that, it probably, as this year already, will be dedicated seeking more feedback from the participants on the service, on the process, what can be done better, etc. So there will be more or less a dialogue between IMIA and the participants on the entire service, content, and possible process improvements. So keeping in mind from this slide are on the one side the strict split between certain tasks, certain responsibilities between IMIA and Perils. And for us at Perils, very important is to bear in mind the two important milestones throughout the year sent out of the service by mid-April and expecting the last backflow from the data responses by beginning of July. Okay, now the question is, what do we do with all the data we get from the respondents? Here, a small example is just a part of the triangle which Martin showed you before. Now, let's assume we have three companies, A, B, and C. Yeah, it is about the ILORI survey, so loss ratio index survey. So we are talking about loss ratio triangles. As an example, everything, all the figures are invented. So we consider three companies. The loss ratios for each company, A, B, and C, these are what we get from you, and we just copy paste them into our spreadsheets. On the other side, we get an indication from you about the premium volume of your book of business. And this is the effective table which was in place for this year's survey. So when we want now to give certain weight to every portfolio, we cannot work with a band. We need a proxy for the premium. A logical proxy would be the GWP, gross written premium average. So it will be the middle of the band. When you look at the table, Simon, on the right-hand side, so you see between 50 and 100 million, so the middle of the band would be 75. So we would need a proxy for the portfolio volume premium by 75. If we go below or above the limit, like above 200 million, so we simply have to assume something, and we were using 250 million. Below 50 million, we used 35. So these are per underwriting here. We use then this premium proxy. And why do we do it actually for every underwriting year? This is because some of the companies may not have the entire history required for the full triangle. So some older years are not available in their statistics. So the premium or the entire business is zero. So for this case, we simply give the proxy for the premium 0. Then we add up all these proxies per underwriting year on the lowest level. You see when you add up 125 and 75, so you get 200. So that would be the first 2 underwriting years, and then the last 2 underwriting years comes 250. In addition to that, from the company C, which steps in with their statistics, so it's 450. It's pretty straightforward. From this, then we calculate the weight of every single company and every single underwriting year. So these are the numbers which are circled with the red 2, and in the column is stated weight. So this is the weight of the premium volume of that particular company in view of the entire summarized premium of all companies. So you can, in this simple example, simply calculate that it's 37.5% for the year 2012 for the company B. Then, when we have once these weights, then we can calculate actually the weighted average of the loss ratios of the companies. So every company, or when we take one element like the underwriting year 2013 and development year 2, so this is then calculated as the weighted average of the loss ratios which correspond above, in this case 8% loss ratio from company B, 16% loss ratio from company A, and always weighted with the weight on the left-hand side. The lowest company C does not contribute to this because it doesn't have any business yet in the underwriting year 2030. So these formulas are actually quite simple. You can try to do something like that in your spreadsheet, but it's actually not necessary. It is rather than the question, why do we use the weighted aggregation of loss ratios? This would be on the next slide. The question is, why don't we use a simple average instead of giving weights, calculating weights for every underwriting year for every company? Well, the answer is actually quite simple in the sense that when we would aggregate portfolios of two very different volumes, companies which have a big engineering portfolio and other company which writes engineering perhaps only as a sideline. So it wouldn't be the appropriate way to calculate the simple average of such two loss ratios. Basically, if we would have all the corresponding premiums and all the corresponding losses from the companies, then we could calculate the aggregated loss ratio. But as you know, we do not have this. It's not allowed from the companies to provide this information. So what we only have are the loss ratios. So we must, in a way, calculate back the correct approximation for the aggregated loss ratios via the weighting the actual loss ratios which we get from the companies, the loss ratio 1, loss ratio 2, loss ratio 3, with the corresponding weights of the portfolio volume, premium-wise. We can look at a simple example. Having one big portfolio with $500 million US and corresponding losses $300 million US. So you would get for that company loss ratio of 60%. On the other side, some substantially smaller second company with only $100 million US and $38 million losses, so resulting 30% loss ratio. Now, when you would build or calculate the simple average of those. So 60 plus 30, 90 divided by 2 companies, 45. Cost ratio 45. But obviously, the impact of the bigger portfolio is much more important. So when we would calculate correctly the overall loss ratio, we would get summarizing or summing up 300 plus 30 million US dollars divided over the entire premium, 500 plus 100, 600 million, resulting 55%. So you see there is a substantial difference in the resulting loss ratios, and that's why it is more correct calculating with the proxies via the premium volume which you respondees or participants in the service indicate us in the survey via the premium volume band. So this is basically all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hand over to Simon.
Thank you very much. Indeed, this was very clear and I think also very nicely illustrated. As Jindrich pointed out very clearly, we are currently in the process to evaluate your feedbacks. We had feedbacks after the presentations. We have a working group tackling this, and we try obviously to improve the surveys. A few minor changes will appear in next year, but one very important one is that we most likely will not use macros any longer, and we have to see how we can design these spreadsheets that perils can send them out, and you guys willing to fill in data have less difficulties to use these spreadsheets. This was always something which caused problems. As Jindrich already explained, to give a little bit more insight into the different sectors of the engineering market, we need, Jindrich nicely explained why we are asking for your premium, and then Jindrich is working with an average of this band. We are asking for the percentage portfolio composition, that we have an idea about the development, and also, for example, if industrial all risk, operational all risk for a respondent is considered engineering. Some companies consider this engineering, others not. We also would like to know if companies participating are operating on a global, regional, or local level. You might have seen for the IMIA rate change index that, for example, the rate changes in the regions were different to the rate changes for the global market, where the complex risks are, compared to local market where maybe less complex risks are insured and remain normally locally. So rate changes were different. So far, we could not do the same for the loss ratio because we simply did not have enough participants in our survey. It was a pilot study, and now in the next year we hope we get enough feedback so that we really can produce loss ratios which are more dedicated to regional markets. We will not go on the country level. There is no incentive or idea to produce incentives saying some market is producing better loss ratios than other. This is not our goal, but I think it's necessary that we split apart the local or regional markets from global markets, that we could show that the very complex FAC markets, London, Singapore, etc., behave slightly different, or maybe behave very different to local markets. This has to be seen, but this is the idea behind this. Then obviously you also remember that we wanted to know where you see the global market, because we are producing here figures. We would like to know how much feedback do we get, for example, for last surveys for the IMIA rate change index, we had roughly 2 billion premium behind the stats. For the IMIA loss ratio index, we had half of it. We had roughly 1 billion premium in our results, or sitting behind the results, and this gives us an idea how much, how representative are the results for the market. We should never forget, as we have a predominantly proportional market, we do obviously not need 100 or 50%. Also, a smaller sample already gives quite good indications. Now, we got the question, why are you asking for booked premiums? And I think Martin explained very nicely that obviously you would love to get earned premium, but earned premium has always a flavor of engineered figure. This is a subjective figure, and the booked premium, if you remember the picture Martin showed, is a very good proxy of the earned premium. That's why we simply asked for booked premiums. We could also work with earned. You can comment this here if you provide earned figures, but with booked premiums, we are happy. If you cannot provide booked premiums, you can, on only written premiums, you can also provide your figures, but you have to flag it here so that the actuary knows. This is regarding the development important, that he knows that reporting a loss ratio based on written premium obviously develops different. The loss ratio artificially is kept lower instead of a loss ratio which is calculated incurred losses divided by booked or earned premium. That's why you have to flag it here. But the baseline is we try whenever possible to get from the participants, from the contributors, gross booked premium before deductions in your reporting currency. You don't have to calculate anything. Why? Because at the end of the day, you anyhow only provide loss ratios. That's why ideally you keep both the premium and the losses always in the same same currency. We were also asked, I mean, we have in the food chain from the direct market to the FAC market to the treaty market, we are in the food chain of this premium, but there are different deductions. This is also the reason why we simply ask about the loss ratio, because the loss ratio at the end of the day gives us a good indication how healthy or technical or profitable, you name it, however you want to name it, but this is a good measure, and it doesn't matter where you sit, because at the end of the day, it just said the loss ratio you have is providing a certain profitability, and we would like to understand the loss ratio behavior of our market. I mean, of course, then come also calculating the combined ratio, there come the expenses on top, but this is not of our interest. We just want to know your premium and your losses divided by each other, losses divided by premium, and the loss ratio out of it. This is the result which is of interest, and irrespective of where you or the contributors company sit in the food chain. The only thing that is sent to perils is, as Jindrich nicely explained, the loss ratio, and he has to calculate back with the premium you indicate. The same happens with the IMIA rate change index. We also would like to know the weight of the contributor and the market position of the contributor, in what market this company works, in a regional or in a global market. And there, as we had more feedbacks, we could split the local market from the global market, and most likely in 2021 we would like to do this also for the loss ratio. Currently we are only able to do this for the rate changes, where we distinguish between the global direct and FAC market and local markets, and the different behavior of rate changes or rate improvements or rate movements. Now, the entries to produce this are rates. We ask people where do you see the rates for a certain standard risk? We ask about the road, we ask about the building, we ask currently about the coal-fired power plant. Most likely we will change this to another type of power plant because coal more and more is banned in many markets, and so on and so on. So we ask about standard, more or less standardized risks. People enter a rate, but what will be the outcome is a percentage. I will show you later on in a demo how this works. And we only will receive an anonymized percentage. We do not know what rates are entered here. This will not be transmitted to perils. Perils will only receive the percentages, and then they will aggregate the percentages. So very importantly, IMIA has absolutely no right and also no interest to know about the real rating environment, but we would like to understand in relative terms how do the rate behave. Currently, as I said, we are working with macros, and this caused issues, so we have to find a way that these spreadsheets are more straightforward. This will also increase the participation ratio, and this is our major goal, that we have more data perils can process. Then this is the outcome, this is the result of these different type of risks: civil projects, erection all risk, oil and gas, power, heavy industry. You see here the different type of risks with slightly different behaviors. At the end of the day, for the IMIA rate change index, we believe that the average gives quite a good overview about the engineering market as such, but it could be that certain type of risks behave slightly differently. We also ask in the survey the prognosis, but the prognosis we are not allowed to publish. We only can publish the prognosis a year later, comparing with the same year. So when we ask for a prognosis for 2021, we compare it in 2021 with the figure you guys, the contributors, provided in 2021. And the only thing, the information we are retrieving from there is how conservative or optimistic or pessimistic the respondents were. Nothing else. The IMIA Mega Loss Index was an initiative launched in 2020, and the feedback was very positive, and we could now also agree with perils that they will continue with this index. So you will also receive one spreadsheet where we are asking about mega losses above our threshold, and we would invite you, kindly ask you to provide data if you know about such losses, even if they are not in your portfolio. We would like to have an overview about the mega losses happening in our market. These are the criteria, and this would, for example, be an example. I only can show you settled losses, obviously, and they are anonymized, they are rounded. You only have occurrence, policy inception year and occurrence year. We give a certain type of risk, and in the region where they happened, we cannot go further down. So the information is anonymized, but out of this list, we anyhow only produce aggregated data per type of risk, per region, or per type of loss. So there is no interest in drilling down into one of these losses, finger pointing or whatsoever. This is definitely not the interest. The interest is to understand tendencies of our market, trends in our market, which result, for example, in increased mega losses in the recent decade compared to the 20 years before. Why did we see since 2007 such an increase in frequency and severity of these large losses? So this is the major goal of this exercise. We published the results in IMIA news sheet. You have down here the link. Now, a new initiative which came mainly from the London engineering group. They asked us, why is the cause of loss so different for mega losses compared to the overview of cause of losses for civil projects? And the answer is relatively simple. There are many more losses behind than here. In the last 30 years, we could only identify around about 100 losses above our threshold. And these are really the mega losses. You would find YouTube videos and press releases, etc., etc. So really headline losses. While here we have obviously by far a bigger amount of risks behind, and it's well possible that the cause of loss, net cat water, is not that important. Rain, flood, water damage for the mega losses were only 17%, while on an overall view, it seems that we have a by far more important contribution of net cat and water. And there is a new initiative for Survey 2021 that we dig more into detail to understand this better, and you will receive in the surveys one spreadsheet which is dealing with this, and we also invite you to contribute in an anonymized way your view on this. More to come early 2021. Now, again, the surveys will be sent out April, May, and we somewhere during the summer holidays, we need the feedback. Obviously, the earlier the better. And we would hope that these explanations provided some comfort and confidence that you feel motivated to contribute to these surveys. And if there are now questions, we can take them. Otherwise, I would quickly open the demo. It's a very quick one showing how you have to enter data in the IMIA rate change index. Stephanie, are there questions in the chat?
I've got two here from Alexei Guzev. What should we do if we have no split to engineering and non-engineering lines in respect of operational property insurance?
Yeah, this is a difficult question. If there is no split, yes, of course, it's difficult to tackle this, but maybe when you triangulate them, I mean, the operational ones, they are developing short. These are normally one-year policies, and the long-term obviously behave differently. It's not easy for me to answer this. The simple answer would be you have to split them in future, but obviously this is up to each of the companies to do how they prefer to. But I think it's what is actually the idea. Why are we doing all this exercise? We would like to show people that they are subsidizing potentially, or the market is subsidizing with annual premium, subsidizing through a financial year view, subsidizing losses from other underwriting years. And with this logic, people do not see clearly that we have an adverse development on an underwriting year basis. And only when you go on underwriting year view, you will realize this. On financial year basis, you will constantly have these ups and downs and volatility, and you might not see trends in your market. I don't know if this completely answers the question, but the recommendation would be try to split it either together with the accounting colleagues or on underwriting level, that people keep track of their portfolios.
Another question from Alexei. The statistics regarding construction lines only is enough, isn't it? What do you think?
Yes, of course. I mean, whatever they can provide. I go back to the survey spreadsheet. I mean, you can mention here what you provide. when you provide 100% project business, that's fine. I mean, you could even provide an aggregated loss ratio and flagging or highlighting here how much of the premium is operational and how much is project. I mean, we should not forget, this is a very rough estimation. We do not pretend to be 100% precise, but we want to show trends. So it doesn't at the end matter that much that you know if it's 92 or 89% of your premium operational or project. Important is that you have a feeling. Do I have 50-50? Do I have 60-40, etc.? To get a feeling how much development is in my portfolio, to do the exercises Martin explained us in the beginning, to do the development to the ultimate loss ratio. Another question?
That's it, actually.
Okay, I will quickly jump to the spreadsheet and then we are done. Okay, can you see this? Stephanie?
Yes, you need to be in presentation mode or do enable content so we can see.
No, but you see the spreadsheet here.
We can,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, this is this message here says nothing else, and this is also the problem we had with a few people who wanted to contribute, that we have currently macros behind the spreadsheet. We need them. We have to see how we can overcome this. But the macro will help to calculate, but actually it would also work without the macro. And then you see 2010 is always set as 100%. And whatever you set here, this will also always be calculated as 100%. Let's change it to 3. You will see it will not change, but the percentage of the others will change. And the only thing which is then calculated with the macro and reported to us, you see 100% is always 2010. You enter the rates you see for a certain type of risk, and the spreadsheet is calculating the percentage decrease or increase, and then you transfer currently the output with a macro and you get something like this. You have seen these are my entries I did, and this will then be detached and sent to perils. Currently we work with the macros. We hope that we can overcome this, that the spreadsheet is not blocked by the firewalls of your companies. Anything else? Otherwise, we can close the call here.
No more questions.
Stephanie?
No more questions.
Okay. Perfect. So that's all from my side. That's all from us for today. I wish you a very pleasant weekend. Thank you very much for your time. And we really hope that you feel motivated to participate in the campaign 2021 to improve the Emea rate change and Emea loss ratio index further. Thank you very much.
I noticed one more question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
It just
please.
came in. Is it possible to provide NDA with perils?
Yes. We had this question already before. Yes, this is possible.
Okay. And can I put this on the website in the next couple of days?
The presentation?
Yes, with your webinar?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of course. Very good. So I wish you a very pleasant weekend, very nice evening to the people in the East, very good day to the people in the West. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you.